I think about the people who died in the years, sort of the immediate years afterwards. And I think in some ways they'd be disappointed with what the country's become because the very patriotism that motivated them to serve, I think it's going away.
I think a lot of people are disappointed with how the country's going.
Yeah, of course.
But
it should be.
You know, speaking of 9/11 and the 20-plus year war that it triggered,
yeah,
and you being here today, speaking with the families, speaking with the sons and daughters of firefighters who have died, police officers that have died.
You're rubber stamping more money for organizations like the Taliban. By the way, while we're on that topic, rubber stamping more money for the open border, because you talk to people, right? And one of the biggest fears with the open border, I mean, there's a lot, but one of the biggest fears with the open border is, okay, how are all those people getting into our country? We know in 9/11, we just had garbage security. A lot of them flew in, were training in American flight schools. We now know that there are thousands of military-age men who've come through that southern border from places like Afghanistan, Iran, and so forth. And so, yeah, man, why shouldn't we be trying to force this government shutdown fight to get something out of it that's good for the American people? Like, why have a government if it's not a functioning government? And if you have a government that's spending hundreds of millions of dollars funding terrorism and then facilitating those people to come across the American southern border, it's totally insane. It's crazy.
But we're sending $1 billion a year to a terrorist organization.
Yeah. After, by the way, they killed 13 of our Marines, or I guess, 11 Marines and a couple other service members just a year ago, actually, just 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago today. Like, if that can't motivate our leadership to get off their asses and actually say, we're done funding the Taliban, then what would actually motivate it? And again, the way Washington works, man, is it's like a rubber stamp mentality. It's that we did this thing 20 years ago, and maybe it made sense when we were trying to convince the Afghans to become more self-sufficient, to train their own military so the Taliban wouldn't take over. Like, whatever. I'm not going to judge what we did 20 years ago, but even if it made sense 20 years ago, it sure as hell doesn't make sense today when the people who are in control of Afghanistan are the literal Taliban, the people who killed our Marines, and by the way, are actively training terrorists right now. But that's what you get when you rubber stamp everything from the past instead of running a functional government where you ask yourself what makes sense and what doesn't make sense in this year, not 20 years ago. Then that's how this stuff ends up happening.
Speaking of wars, I think a lot of Americans are tired of funding all these wars.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Last night on the debate stage, we saw Trump and Kamala kind of bat that back and forth.
One of his best moments, I thought, last night.
We're paying for it. You guys have a plan. I'd like to dive into how exactly are you going to go after and remove all of these immigrants?
Yeah. So first, let me preface that because I think you got to stop the bleeding, right? Whenever you got a problem, like, somebody cuts your leg off, stop the bleeding and then figure out how you're going to reattach the leg.
How would you, we tried to lock the border up first go around.
Yeah.
What's going to change this go around?
So a couple things. First of all, it wasn't perfect when Trump was president, but man, it was very good.
This is my last question. We're running out of time here. And I talked to a lot of just everyday Americans.
Yeah.
And the one thing that everybody wants me to ask you is childcare costs, healthcare costs.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I just talked to my brother-in-law. He's paying $60,000 a year on childcare and healthcare costs.
Yeah.
And so, Kamala voted against the childcare tax credit.
Yep.
Several years ago.
That's right.
How are you and President Trump going to make healthcare, childcare, these kind of everyday necessities more affordable for everyday American people?